So let's talk now about the principles. So we have balance. We have proportion. We have emphasis. Unity. Some people say harmony. And we have rhythm. And some people say repetition. Okay, so there's my messy writing. Okay, the principles, these principles are ways we can organize these elements. Okay, I'm going to go back to that camping picture. So I'm going to go proportion first because I was talking about space when I was having us look at this picture here. So space is an element, and one way we can organize space is with the proportion of the objects we place on our composition, on our the piece of paper or canvas or whatever we're actually creating our design on. So proportion, that's what I was talking about with these trees. So proportionately, this is larger. This is physically larger if I measure it. And this one is physically smaller. So through using proportion, we can create this element of space. Here's a big one in proportion to this small one. Okay? Another area of proportion is the mountains. The mountains are very small in proportion to the tent. The tent is large. So this playing with proportion as a way to organize what we've put in our composition creates this space. Does that make sense? All right. Let's talk about rhythm and repetition. So here we have this repetition on this border of this design, this kind of triangular rectangle thing with this blue line here. And then there's more of these little, this is also a triangular shape here with these little triangular points, right? So we have a lot of triangular type shapes and a lot of rectangles that are creating this border design. So our eye looks at this and finds it very pleasing because there's nothing jumping out saying, ah, that doesn't belong. The pattern is flowing smoothly, kind of like the way music does, without having any jangly notes. Now, there is this little symbol in the corner. So we've got this nice repetition going. Boom. Here's a disruption in the repetition. So our eye goes, oh, what's that? So that's something that our eye will pay attention to because it's flowing along, flowing along, flowing along, and then there's something different there. Does that make sense? If we had a painting that was made up of nothing but this border just stacked on top of each other over and over and over and over again, the whole painting was filled with that. It was all the same color, all the same size. It was just this repeat, repeat, repeat. Our eye would actually find that boring. So with the repetition and the rhythm, even though this is pleasing to our eye because there's nothing jumping out that's saying, it's not safe, it's not safe. It's also not boring because it's only a border with this other design happening. Does that make sense? Whereas if it was nothing, if it was just a canvas that was simply filled up with this shape, same color, same size, just repeated over and over and over and over again, we would get tired of looking at that. It would not hold our interest very long. Okay, so there's rhythm and repetition. All right. Let's see what else we've got. All right. Let's look at emphasis. So this whole page is just black and white. There isn't any color change happening. There is lines. And so the line is a way that's organizing we've got these chunks, right? And the line is helping us say, okay, this is a unit, this is a unit, this is a unit. We have repetition and rhythm going because we've got these blocks, these rectangular blocks that are holding information. We have rhythm and repetition because all of the text is over here. And then we have a large image here in the middle. And then we have smaller images here on the right side. So there's some rhythm and repetition happening here. Let's look at the emphasis. So this is the whole tree. And then we're getting the emphasis of this is what one particular little branch looks like. So this is the emphasis. It's in detail. It's blown up large. It has some different textural elements with it, whereas this is just this kind of almost like a block print, right? There's not a lot of definition happening within the middle of the tree. Like we're not seeing individual leaves and branches and things like that. We're seeing a silhouette of it that's been colored in, right? So the emphasis is on this design here, which is using line and using texture and using value contrast between the black line and the white space. Same thing with here. We also have this one has a lot of texture drawn in to this element that's the emphasis of this particular rectangular section. And with here, look at all these little repetitive, they're almost like little circles, right? Being repetitive. And that's creating these little branches within this twig or whatever you want to call this. So it's giving texture. All those little repeated tiny little circles are actually creating texture within this branch. However, the emphasis here is on this design because it's blown up, it's in detail, it's larger because we know this is a sprig. So this is a large element compared with the whole tree. Does that make sense? So anyway, so these are some ways that these principles organize these elements. So I know it can get confusing. And for our purposes, for building these collage clusters that we're going to be making, it's not important that you memorize these. There's no quiz, there's no test. But this is something, this is like basic vocabulary, basic art vocabulary. So these are fancy pants art terms that you can think about your designs to say, oh, do I have a line element going through? Am I looking at, is there an emphasis point in my design? What is the balance in terms of, so is the design right smack in the middle, or is the design off to one side or the other side? Let me get that camping one. Let me see if I can find that. Here we go. Okay, so if we had, let's look at these trees. Okay, so these trees, if you put a line down the center of this tree, what's on one side of the tree is very similar to what's on the other side of the tree. Same thing here. If you drew a line down the middle of this tree, what's on this side of the tree is very similar to what's on this side of the tree. In terms of the design, we call it weight. How dark it is, how colored in it is, where it's filling up the space on the page, things like that. If I look at this design, I don't have something, if I put a line down the middle of this camping design, what's on this side is different than what's on this side. They're vastly different. The colors are different. The individual components are different, right, between the two sides. So that these are the types of things that we look at when we look at balance. All right. So I think that that is enough art vocabulary. As I'm building these clusters, I will talk about some of these things. So I wanted you to have some exposure to this vocabulary so that as I'm using these words, you understand what I'm talking about, what I'm referencing. Okay, so this gives us a common vocabulary, so we're speaking a similar language as we build our collage clusters.